It is Thursday, July 28th, and we are back. You're watching Right on Cue College Sports. That is right. That is right. Welcome in. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your supporting Right on Cue College Sports. I am Tyson Quillard. I am your host. And, we are now back after taking a little short of 2-month summer break here. An absolute ton of awesome collegiate events have taken place that I'm hoping I can get to make some videos for and put out for you to inform you about what's taken place. Maybe look at, the progression of certain programs, or you find out, hey, this person did awesome at my school or my alma mater. So I'm going to try and put those together for you. We had the College Baseball World Series. We have had the Women's College Softball World Series. I tried to warn you about that, Jocelyn Allo. She's going to win that greatest women athlete of the year at the ESPYs, I guarantee you. Absolute stud. And then an awesome outdoor NCAA track and field season. Abby Steiner, Favor Ofili, taking the world by storm. Randolph Ross gets his 4th NCAA title, goes on, qualifies for Worlds at the U.S. Nationals, and then somehow wasn't able to take a drug test when he was supposed to and is disqualified from Worlds. A couple of strange storylines from that Worlds. One involved a false start that was like a thousandth of a second too fast. It wasn't before the gun was shot. I mean, bizarre stuff. I'm hoping we get into making some of those videos. A lot of really fun stuff to talk about. But it is now time for us to get back to our bread and butter. It is 30 days now until the kickoff of the 2022 college football season. And in true form, we're going to go ahead and bring you the first of our slate of conference previews to get you ready for the upcoming college football season. And we're starting today in the wild, wild Mountain West. Now, this is no longer really a conference of just Boise State. This conference is really gaining a lot more national respect. You've had 5 different teams from this conference that have finished ranked in the final top 25 in the last 3 years. 5 different teams. The conference has an 11-5 bowl record in the last 3 years and 5-1 last year. This means they're getting woefully underseeded into bowls. They should be getting into better bowl games. Hopefully, the bowl selection committee can make adjustments for that and get them into better bowls. You've had 6 different teams that have won 10 games or more in that same time period. Oh, yes. And in other news, as the world keeps turning in college football, the Mountain West has decided they're going to abandon the divisional format starting in 2024. So it'll just be some semblance of trying to get them to play as many teams as they can within the conference, maybe like a 9-game conference schedule. And then at the end of the season, like with the Big 12 now, the top 2 teams record-wise will play for the conference championship. Just to digress for a moment here, what an incredible and unbelievable, just crazy and wild college football offseason we have seen. In the 25 years that I've followed this very closely, I've never seen an offseason this chaotic with this much uncertainty up in the air, right? Not only do you have the continuing of conference realignment, right? You've got now, we just recently found out USC and UCLA are going to be joining the Big Ten here in a couple of years. Now, that's got the Mountain West all of a sudden is going, hey, are we going to get a couple teams from the Pac-12? Maybe if some of these other teams jump, maybe we end up picking up Washington State, Oregon State, maybe Cal. A lot of craziness. Some people might say, well, it was more crazy whenever it was 12 years ago when there was real serious conference realignment. You kind of had the dissolvement of the Big East and the Big 12. I remember, you had Texas A&M, Missouri jumped from the Big 12 to the SEC. Colorado went to the Pac-12, Nebraska to the Big 10. I get it. But that wasn't in conjunction with NIL and with transfer portal activity at the same time. There's just so much going on right now. You had, just as an example, the reigning Biletnikoff Award winner, the reigning top wide receiver in college football, transfers from Pittsburgh to USC a day after the portal was supposed to be closed. And already now, 2 months after he has transferred, he's already upset about the conditions of his NIL deal, feels like he was misled. Going to be real interesting to see how all this plays out. A lot of promises being made, but there's also a lot of kind of smoke and daggers and You're going to have to be sort of careful, CYA kind of stuff. But let's get back to the Wild Wild Mountain West. How about some coaching changes for you? Fresno State. Jeff Tedford comes in to replace Kalen DeBauer, who just recently took the Washington job. Now, Jeff Tedford coached at Fresno State from 2017 to 2019. Fresno State was 1-11 in 2016 before Tedford got there. Then under Tedford, they went 10-4 and 12-2 in his first 2 seasons. In 2019, after going 4-8, Tedford retired for medical reasons. How about in Fort Collins? In comes Jay Norvell to replace the fired head coach Steve Adazio, who, just if I can digress for a minute, I obviously live near this area of Fort Collins. I haven't heard a single person who has anything nice to say about Steve Adazio. Just kind of a real piece of work, but we wish him the best as he goes off to coach, be an assistant coach on a high school team in Texas or something. But anyways, back to the Colorado State Rams. Jay Norvell coached Nevada from 2017 to 2021, had a winning record in 4 of those 5 seasons. Norvell had a 2-1 bowl record in that time. He's really kind of a defensive-minded head coach, and that's definitely something that the Rams need. The Rams were averaging giving up 32 points per game the last 2 years. That's just atrocious and terrible. So hopefully he can get that turned around. Now coming in at Nevada to replace Jay Norvell, who went on to coach at Colorado State, is Ken Wilson. Now he coached at Nevada from 1989 to 98 and from 2004 to 2012. He had 5 seasons as an associate head coach and 4 seasons as a defensive coordinator. He has really, really deep ties to the Nevada community there in Reno. He was most recently the defensive coordinator at Oregon for the last 3 years. I think this is a really good hire for Nevada to steady the ship because when Jay Norvell left, a lot of players transferred. His defensive coordinator left. I mean, the program really looked like it was getting gutted, but they recovered, I think, pretty well here. How about now down in Hawaii? Timmy Chang, kind of the chosen son, comes in to replace Todd Graham. Boy, this program got way off the rails under Todd Graham. In just 2 seasons, the culture was completely toxic, accusations of verbal abuse and all kinds of craziness. They needed to clean the slate. So anyways, like I said, Hawaii also went back to their roots with a familiar name. In his 5 seasons as Hawaii's quarterback, Timmy Chang broke 3 NCAA records, passing completions, yards, and touchdowns. He was most recently the wide receivers and tight end coach at Nevada for 5 years. So this is another coach that left Nevada. But it remains to be seen how proven he can be as a head coach. He really has no D1 experience, even as a coordinator. But he's a very popular pick with the locals, and this is a program that's really in terrible shape. So we'll have to see how this turns out for them. How about let's dive into some major transfer portal news. Hawaii's quarterback from last year, Chevin Cordero, transferred out to San Jose State. He had almost 2,800 yards, 20 pass touchdowns last year. Elsewhere, unfortunately for our fans in Laramie, Wyoming's leading rusher, Xavier Valade, transferred to Arizona State, and their leading receiver, Isaiah Neuer, transferred to Texas. And their leading candidate for starting quarterback next year, probably Levi Williams, transferred to Utah State. That hurts the Wyoming program. I feel for you, Craig Bull. San Diego State, on the other hand, has a huge upgrade at quarterback with the transfer from Virginia Tech, Braxton Burmeister. Now, Nevada lost a grip of players, like I said, mostly on the defensive end. And just to kind of round this out, New Mexico's best weapon, their running back, Aaron Dumas, has transferred to Washington. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Unfortunate for the Lobos. How about some players to watch this upcoming season? I got 2 quarterbacks for you. Jake Haener at Fresno State, Logan Bonner at Utah State. Both of them threw for over 3,600 yards. Both of them threw for more than 33 touchdowns last year. Although Bonner threw 12 interceptions, so a little boom and bust dynamic with him, but both are at the helm of a top 20 offense in the country. How about outside of quarterbacks? Running back Brad Roberts, the stalwart backfield guy out of the Air Force Academy, 1,356 yards last year, 13 touchdowns. This Falcons running game is elite, top 10 in the country by my metrics. Oh, and how about speaking of the Air Force Academy, linebacker Vince Sanford, 59 tackles, 9.5 sacks last year, 4 forced fumbles. He's probably my leading candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. Now, with all that being covered, let's take a look at the breakdown of my power ratings here in the West Division. So you can see here I've got Fresno State, San Diego State, San Jose State, Nevada, UNLV, and Hawaii. The power ranking is that first column. The second column is their record from last year. So you can see I have UNLV improving, Hawaii not improving, like Hawaii getting much worse, but just a lot of turnover. We'll see how Timmy Chang can handle that. Let's kick things off with the Fresno State Bulldogs. This is the team in the conference that I am the highest on. The Bulldogs have, in my opinion, a real Heisman dark horse at quarterback in Jake Haener. Just over 4,000 yards passing, 33 touchdowns on 67% completion last year. He really only had 2 bad games all year. A completely inexplicable 3-point loss at Hawaii, where he threw 4 interceptions, and a 26-point drubbing at the hands of Boise State at home, where he threw another 3 interceptions. Both of those really had me scratching my head. He has all the talent in the world, but the tendency to press in close games makes you a little apprehensive. Now, the starting running back, Ronnie Rivers, is gone, but Jordan Mims is back in the backfield. He had 710 yards, 6 touchdowns last year. I think that'll be a good offset to the pass game. Haener also gets back his top 2 targets from last year, Cropper and Kelly. Now, Jalen Cropper had almost 900 yards and 11 touchdowns receiving last year. He's a stud. Look for him to maybe, if they can get that connection going, he might get on some of the early Biletnikoff watch list out there. This will be, unquestionably, in my opinion, the best offense in the West Coast. And by that I mean Mountain West, Pac-12, maybe even Big 12. On the defensive side of the ball, Fresno returned 73% of their production from last year, including their top 3 tacklers. Free safety Evan Williams had 90 tackles, 3 interceptions, and 2 fumble recoveries last year. In the linebacking core, Malachi Langley and Lavelle Bailey can be kind of really good run stoppers, but they're best in pass defense, covering tight ends, slot receivers out in the flat or a narrow post down the field. This defense is not wildly skilled, but they are very experienced. They will be starting only 1 sophomore. All the other starters are seniors or juniors, so they should be having good communication, even though they're not wildly talented. Now, Fresno almost knocked off Oregon on the road last year. They get their in-state rival, Oregon State Beavers, in week 2 this year. That will be kind of the first big test for this team. I think they will clear that hurdle. And then the following week, they travel to USC. USC is a team, I'll talk about it when I do the Pac-12 preview, but it's basically a team of mercenaries. Their biggest liability last year was on defense. They didn't make any great grand improvements there, but they brought in a ton of talent and skill on offense, but they're all new. They're all young and new and don't know each other. And, I mean, can you create that culture, that mesh in the offseason? They're basically mercenaries, like I said. So I think USC is going to probably struggle early but get stronger as the season goes on. This is an early game against Fresno State. I think this will be the moment in time when all the hype falls off of Lincoln Riley and USC in 2022. I'm confident that the Bulldogs will get this win over USC. A lot of people are going to be shocked by that, but I think it's going to happen. That'll be, by the way, don't even bother bringing your defenses. That's going to be 70 to 65 that game. Just a complete, run and gun all over the field. All the points and offense you can handle. They do have a really tough game, does Fresno State, at Boise State on October 10th. They will be looking for revenge from last year's embarrassing loss at home. This Fresno State team could win 10 games, I think, pretty easy. Just keep in mind, though, you do have the new head coach in Jeff Tedford. How about the San Diego State Aztecs? The Aztecs won the West Division last year. I got to say, Brady Hoke and San Diego State go together like peanut butter and jelly. The team's leading rusher, Greg Bell, is gone, but Chance Bell should be a decent replacement. The run game is very system-oriented. You finally have some stability at quarterback after kind of seesawing between Johnson and Brookshire all year last year in the Virginia Tech transfer Braxton Burmeister. The Aztecs returned their leading receiver, Jesse Matthews, who went for almost 700 yards, 9 touchdowns last year. But he's really kind of the only proven weapon. You got the freshman Ross Ulugalu, who is projected to start at right guard. I think that could kind of be a vulnerability in pass protection and between the tackles in the run game. Now, the defense is always a pillar for the Aztecs, bunch under Brady Hoke. San Diego State had the second best defense in the country last year, stopping the run, and they returned many, many key pieces. You do lose the Mountain West Conference Defensive Player of the Year in defensive end Cameron Thomas to the NFL, but the anchor really for this defense is in the D-line is Jonah Tavai. He had 8.5 sacks last year. He gets upfield really quickly. Keyshawn Banks progressed a lot on the D-line as well last year, 5 sacks of his own. You got Michael Shawcroft will likely be the field general at the inside linebacker this year. If there is a weakness in this defense, it might be the youth in the secondary. These Aztecs finished the regular season last year at 11-1, beating Boise State at home 27-16 on the last Friday in November, before they went on to get just absolutely blown out in the Mountain West Conference Championship game by Utah State. This season, they are at Utah, which I have projected to be a top 5 team in the country. Then in October, you are at Boise State and at Fresno State. You finish the season off with a damn good Air Force team at home. I think the schedule's really pretty brutal. 9 wins is probably the most you can expect here with all of the turnover. But this program is in great shape with Brady Hoke back at the helm. And now how about San Jose State? The Spartans team has consistently been one of the hardest teams to analyze over the last 4 years. They've gone in the last 4 years 1-11, 5-7, 7-1, 5-7. Nick Starkel, who had a breakout year in 2020, really underperformed last year at quarterback, but now we enter the Chevin Cordero era, who transferred from Hawaii and is a stellar quarterback. Cordero is maybe the second most talented quarterback in the conference, but you only return 58% of the offensive production. Kyrie Robinson becomes the starting running back, and Isaiah Hamilton is now your top target in the passing game. They combined for just 3 touchdowns last year. Lots and lots of inexperience. I see this offense struggling to get started. But with Brent Brennan at the helm, the one thing that you know for sure about this Spartans team is they have solid defense. First team All Mountain West Conference linebacker Kyle Harmon returns after finishing 4th in the nation with 134 tackles last year. Viliami Fehoko, the perpetual backfield terrorizer, leads a senior-laden defensive front with, alongside the 2020 Mountain West Conference Defensive Player of the Year, Cade Hall. Bizarrely, this team struggled to get turnovers from their opponent last year, but their top players in the secondary return as well. This defense is elite and will keep San Jose State in games that their offense is struggling in. The front half of the schedule, let's look at the schedule. The front half of the schedule is going to be so important because this schedule is really backloaded. I know it may sound crazy, but Auburn is way down this year. The Spartans will have tough games early that they will need to win at Auburn, against Western Michigan, and at Wyoming. Must wins, all of those, because they do not have the offense to hang in the games late in the season. Fresno, at San Diego State, and at Utah State late. If there is a candidate for surprise team of the year, it could be these guys. They could go really anywhere from 4-8 to 8-4 by my metrics. How about the aforementioned Nevada Wolfpack? So Nevada had the conference player of the year and 8th ranked passer in the country last year at quarterback in Carson Strong, and they still lost 5 games. Jay Norvell jumped to Colorado State. I already mentioned that, and this roster got completely gutted. Nate Cox steps in at quarterback, but half of the offensive line and all really of their skill players, except for the running back Toa Taua, are completely up for grabs. You can see from the depth chart there, not a lot of established starters. Nevada returns the least production in the country. Just 20% on offense and 34% on defense. This team is in complete rebuild mode. I think you're likely to see several walk-ons starting for the Wolfpack this year. Coach Ken Wilson certainly has his work cut out for him in year 1 with all of this turnover. After a rather easy start against New Mexico State and Texas State, then you get Incarnate Word. The Pack will be then at Iowa, and they have Air Force. I think they're likely to lose as many as 8 games, including the season finale at a much improved UNLV bunch. How about speaking of that UNLV bunch? This really is a make or break year for Marcus Arroyo, who is currently 2-16 at UNLV. Cameron Friel really improved, I thought, at quarterback last year as a freshman. But looking at the depth chart, I mean, he's not going to get the reps this year. In comes four-star transfer from Tennessee, Harrison Bailey, who really has Vegas excited. You are featuring a brand new running back and only return one of your top three receivers, though. That plus a rather inexperienced offensive line has me hesitant to move them too much. The defense, though, is improved as well. Bryce Jackson and Phillip Hill anchor a deep secondary. The two combined for 107 tackles, 4 interceptions last year. Austin Ajaki is the leader at linebacker. He's going to really need to step up for this unit. There's definitely potential for Arroyo to save his job here. The Rebels do have a pretty tough schedule, though, at Utah State, at San Jose State, Air Force, at Notre Dame, at San Diego State, and Fresno. That is a brutal 4-game stretch. But there are 4 wins to be had here if they could stay focused, I think. And now to the Hawaii Warriors. Man, if Nevada isn't the team in the most disarray, it is this Hawaii squad. Your starting quarterback for the last 2 years, Chevin Cordero, transferred out, and you have the coaching change. Sophomore Braden Schrager will run things this year and did get a little playing time last year when Cordero was injured. He started 3 games. This offense will be leaning a lot on Dedrick Parson at running back, as the O-line has some holes and you have a brand new stable of wide receivers. Now, far and away, the best player on this defense the last few years has been Darius Masau at linebacker, and he figured that out as well, and the former Bednarik candidate has transferred to UCLA. Your top 2 secondary players, Corey Bethelli and Cam Lockridge, have transferred to Arizona State and Fresno State, respectively. Only half of the positions on defense have an established starter. The cupboard is extremely bare in Hawaii. Like with Nevada, the Warriors will be starting walk-ons this year. Now, how about we turn our focus to the Mountain Division? In apparently the last season, we'll be able to break this down by divisions. You can see I have the Air Force Falcons as the top power ranking team. Utah State, Boise State, Wyoming, Colorado State, and the lowly Lobos, my alma mater. How about let's start with Air Force. Man, Troy Calhoun is just incredible. Coaching at an academy where you're at a recruiting disadvantage, running the triple option, and wingback sets, and still, in his 14-year tenure, they've had 10 winning seasons. Last year was the 4th season with 10 or more wins. I mean, the Falcons led the nation in rushing offense. Get this, though. Almost 48 more yards per game on the ground than the second-best rushing offense last year. They return almost everyone on the offense. Hazik Daniels is back at quarterback for the 3rd straight season. He passed for over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, which, if you know the service academies, that's an incredible amount of passing. And he rushed for 734 yards, 11 touchdowns as well. His backfield mate, first-team All-Mount West Conference running back Brad Roberts, I mentioned, returns for his junior campaign on the shoulders of 1,300 yards, 13 touchdowns. David Cormier and Micah Davis are real weapons at wideout in both the run and the pass game. You do have 3 sophomores starting on the O-line. This has me a little bit concerned. That's especially important, the offensive line and the style of football that the Falcons play. Corbin Taylor and Trey Taylor are sensational on the defensive secondary. Look for them to be real disruptors in the passing game, as the Falcons' opponents are likely going to be trying to push the pace of the game, throw the ball. And I already mentioned Vince Sanford, 9.5 sacks last year. The sophomore Alec Mock is also a tremendous young talent on this interior of this defense as well. Air Force had the 5th best defense in the country last year, and they are primed to be even better this year. If I could digress for one moment, the one major thing that Colorado, my team, struggled with last year was offensive production. I haven't seen any tremendous upgrades that they've made on the offensive side of the ball, which is an extreme frustration of mine. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you think it's the old days and we're going to twinkle toe down into Colorado Springs and beat this Air Force Falcons team, that ain't going to happen. This is one of the best defenses in the country. So we got a couple of games, or we got one game against TCU before we play Air Force. We better get some offense figured out, okay? Side note, close. Let's go back to the Falcons here. You know, it's so strange. All 3 of the games that the Falcons lost last year were at home or on neutral sites. They were undefeated on the road. The Falcons' schedule shapes up pretty nicely this year. They'll cruise through the first 5 games, including a game against Colorado, before their first real true test at Utah State on October 8th. They then get Boise State at home and travel to San Diego State at the end of the season. I think this is probably the easiest schedule in the conference. I think Air Force can expect to win 10 games again this year. How about the other possible contender for divisional champion, Utah State, that last year's Mountain West Conference champions? They will have an electric offense again this year. The quarterback Logan Bonner enters this season as the main competition for Jake Haener for Offensive Player of the Year in the conference. Bonner passed for over 300 yards 5 times last year, over 350 yards 3 times last year. Calvin Tyler Jr. returns as the leading rusher, almost 900 yards, 7 touchdowns, behind an O-line that returns all 5 starters. The Aggies are a bit thin in the wide receiving core, but Bonner's going to have time behind this experienced offensive line. But, keep in mind, they do have their top 3 receivers from last year are all gone. They do add Brian Cobbs from Maryland, and McGriff and Van Leeuwen are likely the other starters in the receiving core. Utah State will need that offense to be flying because they return just 47% of their defensive production. 6 new starters will be featured on the defense. Bong Patchen is your only really returning starter in the linebacking core, and he only had 55 tackles last year. The other 2 linebackers are projected to be transfers, Tafisi and Switzer. In the secondary, Hunter Reynolds is a key piece coming back. He was the team's 2nd leading tackler last year at safety, but there is considerable uncertainty on this side of the ball for the Aggies. Utah State does have a tougher schedule this year. They're at Alabama, which, you just kind of scrap that one. They are at BYU, and BYU is a top 15 team, 15-20 team in my power ratings, and at Boise with a huge matchup at home versus Air Force in the middle of the season. This offense will keep them competitive in most games, but I'd be surprised if they win more than 9 games with the difficulty of this schedule. Now, you've all been probably wondering, when is he getting to Boise State? Boise State, I got to tell you, maybe the most overhyped player in the conference is Hank Bockmeyer, the quarterback for Boise State. He had a couple big games, beating BYU and Fresno last year, but he also just flat out laid an egg several times in close games, UCF, San Diego State, and Oklahoma State, as he threw late 4th quarter interceptions in each of those games. You could really hang the loss around his neck in those games. But he's back for a senior season at quarterback, and so too is George Holani, the Broncos' breakout running back from last year. You do lose, though, Khalil Shakur, who was so much of the team's offense production last year. He's now playing in the NFL. You also have a freshman at right guard. I have this team much lower than most other projections. I just don't buy that the offense is going to be consistent enough. On the defensive side, however, this team is experienced and deep. You did lose Riley Wimpy from the linebacking core, but the senior Ezekiel Noah is more than ready, I think, to take over that spot. Skinner and Jones bolster a talented secondary, and they combined for 144 tackles, 4 interceptions last year. And the D-line returns all 4 starters, fronting this 4-3 defensive scheme. Here's where the problem's at, in addition to the offense. Boise has, unquestionably, in my opinion, the toughest schedule in the conference. They're playing at Oregon State, hosting BYU in the non-conference. They also get San Diego State, Fresno State, Air Force, and Utah State. Just an unfortunate setup of their schedule. 3 of those games, though, are at home, so that gives them a chance. I think the offense is really going to struggle against San Diego State, BYU, and Air Force. The Broncos, I think, will be lucky to win 7 games this year. Now, how about the Wyoming Cowboys? Now, I mentioned earlier the Cowboys lost probably their 3 biggest weapons on offense. They are 107th in the country in returning offense. Yikes. Andrew Peasley, the Utah State transfer, is projected to be the starting quarterback. He had very limited play last year, but he did throw for 195 yards, 3 touchdowns against Air Force. And I already mentioned Air Force as one of the better defenses in the country, and really their strength is their secondary, so that's pretty impressive. Replacing Valladay at running back will be Titus Swin. He went for almost 800 yards, 7 touchdowns last year. Joshua Cobbs is really the only proven wideout that you're likely to start, and you're going to start a freshman at left tackle. I think this offense is going to really take some time to develop. The early season is going to be tough for this squad. But if anyone can manage it, it's Craig Bohl. I have tremendous respect for Craig Bohl. He is a great coach. I think he's done a very solid job at Wyoming, 4 winning seasons since 2016. On the defensive side, it's all about filling the hole left by Chad Muma. Easton Gibbs will be the will, and Shea Sueonoa will become the starting Mike linebacker. Sui Onoa is a first-time starter, along with 4 other new starters in this unit. But the D-line is very strong, with Godboot at nose tackle and Bertagnoli off the edge. The first game of the season will tell a lot for Wyoming. They're on the road at a Big Ten team, Illinois. I think they're certainly beatable, but they are better than last year. This is a tricky schedule, and they finish up with Boise State and at Fresno State. The Cowboys are going to have to fight to get to bowl eligibility. 6 wins max, I think, for the Cowboys this year. Now, how about the Colorado State Rams? A lot of changes going on in Fort Collins. Last year's quarterback Todd Centeio transfers to James Madison. 4-star freshman Clay Millen, who followed Norvell over from Nevada, is going to be taking over the helm at quarterback. In total, there will be 7 new starters on offense, 4 new starters on the offensive line, all of which are transfers. They lost the best tight end in the country in Trey McBride to the NFL. I think this offense is going to be improving and headed in the right direction. But they have talent, but they're really young and new. The Rams returned 71% on the defensive side of the ball, including starting linebacker Cameron Carter and Daquan Jackson, who combined for 184 tackles, 7 sacks last year. The nickelback Taiwan Francis returns for his senior year, and he's just really a ball hawk in the open field. The D-line might take some time to come along, losing Scott Patchin to the NFL and Toby McBride to graduation. Devin Phillips at D-tackle is going to need to really kind of get pressure up the middle because your other D-tackle is a freshman first-time starter. Like I said, I really think this team has a whole different feel about it. They're maybe a year, 2 years away, but the schedule starts out really rough. For the Rams, at Michigan, you're also at Boise, and then you get Air Force. If the offense comes along, I think this team could win 4, maybe 5 games. And now how about my Lobos? New Mexico has had exactly 2 winning seasons since 2009. And a lot of questions are surrounding year 3 of the Danny Gonzalez era in Albuquerque. The Rio Rancho product Isaiah Chavez takes over the reins at quarterback as a sophomore. He has very limited experience, but he did lead the Lobos to a win at Wyoming last year. Your top 3 rushers are all gone, and you're starting 5 sophomores and 2 freshmen on offense. Your best weapon is Wysong at wide receiver. Just with so much change and youth, they were one of the worst offenses in the country last year. I have them ranked 130th again this year. On the defensive side, Tavion Combs and Jarek Reed are really the hallmarks in the defensive secondary. They're both actually pretty solid run stoppers at safety. The loss of Joey Noble leaves a huge hole in the defensive line, and the defense as well will be starting 5 sophomores. Zaire Riley will be leaned on a lot for leadership at linebacker for this very, very young unit. It's hard to believe that a roster can end up so young and inexperienced, but this is where the Lobos are at. And I think it's an indictment of the head coach. Maximum 3 wins on the schedule here. It's time for a change at the top, and we need to think long and hard about who is going to be a suitable replacement. So now let's take a look here. This is just a final look across the entire conference at the power rankings that I have. And we are looking forward to seeing how the Mountain West breaks out this season. All right, let's close out by taking a look at some of the primetime games that you're going to be wanting to keep an eye on if you are a Mountain West fan here in the first couple of weeks of the season. Saturday, September 3rd, you've got Utah State traveling to Alabama. You got Boise State traveling to Oregon State, and Colorado State on the road at Michigan. That next Saturday, September 10th, you're going to have San Jose State traveling to Auburn. Remember, I told you that's a winnable game for the Spartans. You got Colorado traveling to Air Force. Air Force will likely win that one. And Oregon State traveling to Fresno State. Fresno State should win that game as well. So we're really looking forward to trying to progress through. I think the next preview I'm going to put out is probably the Pac-12 preview. Then we'll move on to probably the Big 12. I'm thinking I might save the SEC and the Big 10 for the very end just because they are the preeminent conferences in college football. But we'll sort of see how that all plays out. Listen, if you think I got something wrong, if you got more feedback, if you got more information, things you want me to look into or correct, please feel free to contact me rightonqcs@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter @rightonqcs. And with all that being said, I'm Tyson Quiller. Thanks for watching. We will get at you next time.